So why are we here? Well, I think a big part of it, and the reason why we attend the numerous luncheons that occur in the Illawarra, is that it's a great opportunity for us all to connect and create new relationships, which is just so critical. Beyond that, we're here to raise valuable funds, as Frank just said, and each year this luncheon is a key part of keeping the clubhouse open. So thank you again for all your support. And then more importantly, I think it's a space for us to stop and reflect on the importance of mental health, and particularly the importance of mental health within the workplace and what we can do to contribute to that as both leaders and as peers and as colleagues. So that's what I want to put the spotlight onto today. To do that, I'm going to share a little bit of my own experience, the journey that I've been through over the last 10 years, maybe beyond that really. To do that, I need to go back in time, back to 2013. So in 2013, I was living in Figtree, so locally, although having moved around a lot before that. And I had two children, my 1-year-old Ryan and my 5-year-old Isabel, who had just started kindergarten. I was married to Craig, and I was working at AHM as digital lead, and had been for just over a year, so not a huge amount of time, but a fairly standard, I guess, life of a young family, normal concerns, but probably the two compounding factors for us were, one, unfortunately my son Ryan had been diagnosed with a chronic heart condition, and also my husband Craig was battling with long-term major depression. And in 2012 and then moving into 2013, it became very clear to me that his depression was worsening again. He struggled, I think, to accept that. Well, he definitely struggled to accept that, but I had become very familiar of the signs that he was, battling the internal demons again. And unfortunately, it continued to decline over the beginning of 2013. And then in May 2013, we hit a crisis point. On May 20th, I remember very clearly us both driving up the driveway and him going left and me going right, and that was the last time I ever saw him alive again. That night, I found out, after many hours spent trying to find out where he had disappeared to, that he had taken his life. Now, to say that it pulled the carpet out from underneath me or knocked me sideways would be the grossest understatement. It felt like a trapdoor opened up underneath me and I just began to plummet downwards. And then when I would think that I had hit rock bottom, another trapdoor would open and I would plummet again. The trouble was, well, not the trouble, probably also a saving grace, was I had two young children. I had a 1-year-old that I needed to care for, and I had a 5-year-old that I needed to care for. The morning after his suicide, I had to get up and get my son out of bed, and I remember playing trains on the floor of his bedroom, very surreal, and then having to get dressed and get my daughter dressed to take her to school. So life just went on immediately. But of course, I was dealing with enormous anxiety and depression and grief, and I can't even probably describe half the emotions that I was feeling, and I was in no place to go back to work. And that's where AHM came in for me. My boss at the time, Margaret Willichley, some of you may know, she was CIO at the time. She rang. I don't know if she spoke to me or she spoke to my mother. It's all a little blurry that time now for me. But she told me that I didn't need to worry about my role, that all I had to do was focus on myself and my children, and that when I was ready, I would be able to come back and my role would be waiting for me. Not only that, I continued to receive all my pay, no holiday was deducted. It was simply a space for me to go away and get better. Well, start getting better. So 2 months later, I did return to work, but it was only 1 day a week, and I sat away from everyone else at first, and then I moved to 2 days a week, and then progressively from there built up to being full-time again. My team was amazing, my boss was amazing, and I really credit the support that I got during that time, both the, I guess, human support, the psychological support, and then the very real practical support to me being able to rebuild my life and maintain, a stable environment for my children. And it didn't stop there, of course, for me. I battled with depression and anxiety for a long time after that. And I had to call on all sorts of supports, from psychology to medication to asking if I could work from home sometimes, mental health days. I was active in asking for that, and I always received it. Now, I know that there will be people sitting in this room who are dealing with bipolar, with major depression, with generalized anxiety, perhaps even with more complex conditions like schizophrenia. And I understand that you may listen to my story and think, it's quite different, right? I had a clear reason to be upset. I was able to justify it in a way. And so it's easier in some ways to ask for support. But it shouldn't be, right? Like 80% of us in this room will have a diagnosable mental health condition in our lives. 80%. 8 out of the 10 people sitting at your table will have a mental health condition at some point in their life. And yet somehow we treat it as something that's rare and secret, and it's stigmatized. What we need to be doing is lifting the curtains on it and getting people talking and recognizing that we're all walking around with our brain in our heads, and we all have a body, and just as we get physically sick, we all get mentally unwell as well. And sometimes it's just a little bit, we just feel a little bit sad, and sometimes we get very sick. And we need to be able to turn up and trust that our workplaces will support us with that. So how can we do that? Well, as leaders, as peers, as colleagues, we have the opportunity, in the same way that I got support, to provide the practical means for people to look after their mental health, and also the psychological supports so that people feel like they can talk and be vulnerable and show up. I spoke to one of my clients earlier this week who has bipolar, and even, she was saying, I would never tell my workplace that I was struggling again, because the first time that I did it was received so badly. And 7 out of 10 Australians say the same things. They don't feel confident that they could front up to work and say, I am depressed, I have bipolar, I am struggling, because there is so much stigma attached to it. And we all have the opportunity to lift that stigma by by recognizing that this is normal. We will all struggle at some point. It is inevitable. So my ask for you today is not just to come here and eat your lunch and feel satisfied with the fact that you have contributed financially, but I would all like for you to think right now of one thing that you could do immediately that would have a positive influence on mental health in your workplace or your environment. And I'd like you to turn to the person next to you, and I would like you to say, I commit to what? That with all that good discussion that was just going on in then, that you did come up with some ideas about what you could do, and that you can genuinely commit to making a difference, whether that is just checking in with someone when you notice they are not being themselves. Whether when someone says, actually, I'm not all right, I had a really tough morning, dig a little bit deeper. Ask, can I help you? What's going on? Do you need some added support? As a leader, think about upskilling your staff in how to have these conversations and build resilience in your teams. You know, give them the communication skills and the tactics to do it, and set up the practical scaffolding as well. I'll just conclude by saying we're okay. For all those, you know, who are struggling at the moment, you know, I know from my own experience that you can and will be all right if you call for support. My daughter Isabel, my son Ryan, incredibly proud of them. Ryan had open heart surgery 3 years ago and recovered amazingly well, and they're both healthy and happy. So thank you very much. And,